I didn't find out the truth because I was snooping. That's the part that still bothers me when I think back on it. Because if I had been the suspicious type, maybe I would have discovered everything years earlier. Maybe I would have saved myself a lot of humiliation. But the reality is, I trusted my husband completely. Not blindly, not in some naive fairy tale kind of way, but in the ordinary way you trust someone you've built a life with for over a decade. His name's Daniel. We met when I was 27 at a 4th of July barbecue in Denver. A mutual friend dragged me there, even though I barely knew anyone. Daniel was standing by the grill in a faded Colorado Rockies cap, arguing with another guy about whether Chicago or New York had better pizza. I remember noticing his laugh before anything else. It was loud and genuine, the kind of laugh that made people around him relax. He noticed me watching and walked over like he already knew me. "Tell me you're on Chicago's side," he said. I told him I'd never been to Chicago. He looked genuinely offended by that, like I'd confessed to never seeing the ocean. By the end of the night, we were sitting on the back steps sharing a beer and talking about nothing important. Movies, old road trips, the worst jobs we'd ever had. He had this easy way of listening that made you feel interesting, even when you weren't saying anything special. 3 years later, we were married. Nothing about our life was dramatic or unusual. We bought a small 2-story house outside Aurora. White siding, squeaky wooden stairs, the kind of neighborhood where everyone mows their lawn on Saturday morning. I worked in marketing for a regional retail company. Daniel worked in construction management, long hours, sometimes traveling to job sites around the state. We didn't have kids, not because we didn't want them, but because life just kept moving. Promotions, deadlines, house repairs, family stuff. 1 year turned into 5, then 10. But we were happy. At least I thought we were. Daniel was the kind of husband who kissed me goodbye every morning, even if he was running late. He remembered the exact way I liked my coffee. He'd randomly show up with takeout from that Thai place on Colfax when he knew I had a rough day. If you asked anyone who knew us, they would have said we were solid, which is why what I eventually discovered didn't just feel like betrayal. It felt like the ground under my life had been fake the entire time. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday afternoon last November. It was cold enough that the sky had that pale gray winter Colorado gets before snow. I had left work early because our office internet crashed and everyone was basically useless without it. When I pulled into our driveway around 3:30, Daniel's truck wasn't there. That wasn't unusual. He was supposed to be visiting a job site near Colorado Springs that day. I went inside, tossed my purse on the kitchen counter, and started making tea. That's when I heard the mail slot clatter. Our mail usually came later in the evening, but sometimes it was early. I walked over and picked up the small stack from the floor. Bills, grocery coupons, some random flyer about gutter cleaning, and one envelope that immediately caught my attention. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Daniel. But the name written on the envelope wasn't exactly Daniel's. It said Daniel Harper. My husband's name is Daniel Carter. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. People get mail wrong all the time. But the address printed underneath was our exact address. Not a typo, not a neighbor's house, our house. The envelope itself looked official. Cream-colored paper, a law office logo in the corner. I stood there for a minute debating whether to open it. Technically, it wasn't addressed to Daniel Carter, but it was still my husband. And curiosity is a powerful thing when something doesn't make sense. I slid my finger under the seal. Inside was a single folded letter. I expected something boring, maybe some legal notice that had nothing to do with us. Instead, the first line made my stomach drop. "Regarding the custody arrangement for your daughter, Emily Harper." I read that sentence 3 times before the words actually registered. Your daughter, Emily Harper. My husband doesn't have a daughter. At least that's what I believed. We had talked about kids plenty of times over the years. He had always said the same thing. No secret kids running around out there, he joked once when we first started dating. I remember laughing about it. Now I stood in my kitchen staring at a letter that suggested the exact opposite. The document mentioned visitation schedules, school district boundaries, a court hearing scheduled for early December in Colorado Springs. My hands started shaking. There had to be some explanation, some weird mix-up with another guy who happened to share Daniel's first name and our address. But one detail kept pulling my attention. The letter used the name Daniel Harper repeatedly. Not Carter, Harper. I walked over to the sink and stared out the window at our backyard, trying to calm the rising panic in my chest. Daniel had been traveling to Colorado Springs a lot recently. He said it was for a large commercial development project. What if? No. I pushed the thought away immediately. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who secretly had a child. At least that's what I believed after 13 years of marriage. I folded the letter back up and put it on the kitchen counter. The rest of the afternoon crawled by. I tried to distract myself with laundry, dishes, anything that kept my mind from spiraling.
but every few minutes my eyes drifted back to that envelope. Around 6:30, I heard Daniel's truck pull into the driveway. My heart started pounding so loudly I could feel it in my throat. He walked in like he always did, kicking his boots off by the door. "Hey, babe," he called. His voice sounded normal, completely relaxed. I stepped into the hallway holding the letter. He smiled when he saw me. "Didn't expect you home this early." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just watched his face, searching for something I had never looked for before. Secrets. Finally, I held up the envelope. "Daniel, why did we get mail for someone named Daniel Harper?" The smile on his face froze. It was subtle but unmistakable. For half a second, his eyes flickered with something I had never seen before. Fear. Then he laughed. "Probably a mix-up," he said casually, reaching for the envelope. But I pulled it back slightly. "It talks about a custody arrangement," I said quietly. That was the moment everything shifted. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked at the letter, then at me. The silence between us felt heavy and wrong. Finally, he rubbed the back of his neck and said something that still echoes in my head. "Where did you get that?" Not, "What does it say?" Not, "That must be a mistake." "Where did you get that?" The tone in his voice wasn't confused. It was nervous. And suddenly, standing in my own hallway, looking at the man I had loved for 13 years, a cold realization started creeping through my chest. I didn't know my husband nearly as well as I thought I did. And the worst part? That letter was only the first piece of proof. I didn't sleep that night.
After I found the court record on my phone, I just sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen until the battery warning popped up. The quiet in the house felt different now, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. Daniel was upstairs asleep, or at least I assumed he was. The thought crossed my mind more than once that maybe he wasn't sleeping at all. Maybe he was lying there awake, wondering how much I'd already figured out. By 3 a.m, I had read the case summary at least 20 times. It didn't contain a lot of detail, but what it did say was enough to make my head spin. The case had originally been filed 9 years earlier. 9. That meant this situation didn't just start recently. It had existed almost the entire time we'd been married, and somehow I had never known. I kept going back to the same question. How? How do you live a completely separate life for nearly a decade without your spouse realizing it? By the time the first pale blue light of morning started creeping through the kitchen windows, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Daniel yet, not until I knew more. If he had managed to hide something this big for this long, then walking into a confrontation without proof felt like walking into a trap. So I did something I had never done before in my marriage. I started quietly investigating my own husband. Daniel woke up around 6:30 like he always did. I heard the shower upstairs, the familiar sounds of our normal morning routine. When he came downstairs, I was already sitting at the table with a mug of coffee. He looked at me for a second longer than usual. "You're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I said. That part wasn't a lie. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter. His eyes flicked briefly toward the drawer where the letter was hidden. Then he looked back at me. "You still thinking about that mail thing?" The casual tone sounded rehearsed. I shrugged. A little. He sipped his coffee. "I'll call the law office today and clear it up." I studied his face while he said it. There was no hesitation, no nervous laugh this time, just calm confidence, which made my stomach twist even tighter, because if he was lying, he had clearly done it many times before. "What's your schedule today?" I asked. "Site meeting in the Springs," he said. "Might run late." Of course it would. Colorado Springs again. He finished his coffee, grabbed his keys, and kissed my cheek like he did every morning. "Love you." "Love you too," I replied automatically. Then he walked out the door. I watched his truck disappear down the street through the living room window. The second it was gone, the house felt eerily empty. I went straight to the kitchen drawer and pulled the letter back out. This time, I took photos of every page with my phone. Then I sat down with my laptop and started digging deeper. The first thing I searched was the mother's name, Lauren Mitchell, Colorado Springs. The results appeared instantly. LinkedIn profiles, Instagram accounts, public records. But one profile caught my attention immediately. A Facebook page. The profile picture showed a woman in her mid-30s with long dark hair standing beside a young girl with braces and a bright pink jacket. The caption under the photo read, "Emily's first soccer tournament of the season." My heart started pounding. I clicked the photo, and when I zoomed in, the air left my lungs, because standing just behind them in the background was a man I recognized instantly. Daniel.
He was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, but there was no mistaking him. My husband, standing beside a woman and a child who apparently shared his secret last name. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I kept scrolling through the photos. There were dozens of them. Birthday parties, school events, trips to the zoo, and Daniel was in many of them. Not all, but enough. Enough to show that he wasn't just some distant father who sent money occasionally. He was physically there, present in this child's life. My hands were shaking as I clicked through the timeline. The earliest photo with him in it was dated 8 years ago. Emily looked about 1 year old. Daniel was holding her, smiling. The same smile he used when we took photos together at family gatherings. Except in this picture, he looked different, more relaxed, like he belonged exactly where he was. My chest tightened painfully, because in that moment, a horrible thought surfaced. What if this wasn't just an affair child? What if Daniel had been living 2 entire relationships, 2 families, 2 identities? I scrolled further. A post from 2 months earlier caught my attention. Lauren had posted a photo of Emily standing in front of a school science fair project. The caption read, "Couldn't have done this without her dad's help. Thanks for staying up all night building volcanoes with us." Us. I stared at that word. The comments below were filled with friends saying things like, "You guys are such a great team. Emily was lucky to have parents like you." Parents. Plural. My vision blurred slightly. These people believed Daniel and Lauren were together, a normal family. I leaned back in the chair, trying to process the reality forming in front of me. While I had been living my life in Aurora for 13 years, believing I had a faithful husband, there was another woman 2 hours away who apparently believed the exact same thing. I didn't know how long I sat there. Eventually, I heard my phone buzz on the table. A text from Daniel. "Meeting started. Might be here most of the day." I stared at the message. Colorado Springs. Of course he was there. The same city where Lauren and Emily lived, the same city where the custody case was filed, the same city where dozens of photos show my husband playing the role of someone else's partner. Something inside me snapped into clarity. For the first time since finding the letter, the confusion started turning into something else. Determination. Because speculation wasn't enough anymore. Screenshots weren't enough. If Daniel had really been living this double life for nearly a decade, then I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed my car keys. By 8:30 that morning, I was on the highway driving south toward Colorado Springs. The entire 2-hour drive, my mind ran through every possible scenario. Maybe Lauren knew about me. Maybe she didn't. Maybe Daniel had some elaborate explanation that would somehow make this make sense. But deep down, I already knew the truth. When I finally pulled into the suburban neighborhood listed on Lauren's Facebook profile, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Quiet streets, kids' bikes on the sidewalks, normal houses that looked exactly like mine. I drove slowly down the block until I saw the address number on a gray 2-story house with a basketball hoop in the driveway. I parked across the street. And that's when I saw something that made my entire body go cold. Daniel's truck, sitting right there in the driveway, exactly where he claimed he'd be working at a job site. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at it. Then the front door of the house opened, and Daniel walked out. But he wasn't alone. A little girl ran out behind him laughing. And right behind her, Lauren.
Daniel bent down and picked the girl up, spinning her around while she squealed. Lauren smiled at him, not the polite smile of a co-parent, the kind of smile you give someone you love. And in that moment, watching from across the street in my car, I realized something devastating. My husband didn't just have a secret child, he had a completely different life. I don't remember breathing while I watched them. Daniel stood in the driveway holding the little girl, Emily, and she had her arms wrapped around his neck like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Lauren stood beside them with her hand resting lightly on his back, the way couples do without even thinking about it. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't distant, it looked comfortable, natural, like they belonged to each other. The little girl said something I couldn't hear from across the street, and Daniel laughed, that same laugh I'd fallen for all those years ago at that 4th of July barbecue. Except now it felt like hearing a stranger's voice coming out of someone I thought I knew. Lauren reached up and brushed something off his shoulder. He leaned down and kissed her, just a quick, casual kiss, the kind married people exchange without even noticing. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like the ground inside my chest gave way. For a moment, I honestly thought I might throw up. Because that wasn't just an affair. That wasn't just a man secretly seeing another woman. That was a husband, a father, a family. and he had been playing that role somewhere else while still coming home to me. Emily ran toward the basketball hoop and grabbed a ball from the driveway. Daniel jogged after her, pretending to block her shot while she shrieked with laughter. Lauren watched them with that quiet smile people have when they're looking at the people they love most in the world. I realized something horrifying then. She didn't look like someone who knew she was the other woman. She looked like someone who thought she had a normal life, which meant one of two things. Either she knew about me and somehow accepted it, or she had absolutely no idea I existed. The thought made my skin crawl. I sat there another 10 minutes watching them, trying to convince myself I was misinterpreting what I was seeing, but every second made it clearer. Daniel wasn't visiting occasionally. He wasn't acting like a guest. He moved around that house like it belonged to him. Eventually, Lauren and Emily went back inside. Daniel followed them, and just like that, the driveway was empty again. I finally forced myself to move. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit there another minute before starting the engine. I drove around the block once, trying to calm down enough to think clearly. My mind was racing in a dozen directions at once. Part of me wanted to storm up to the front door and demand answers. Another part of me wanted to drive straight back to Aurora and pretend none of this had happened. But the image of Daniel kissing Lauren in that driveway kept replaying in my head. That moment had erased any last piece of denial I had. My husband had built another life, and he had done it while sharing a bed with me. I parked 2 houses down the street, sat there, staring at the gray house again. Then I did the one thing that felt like the only real option left. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. Every step up that driveway felt unreal, like I was walking into someone else's nightmare. I rang the doorbell. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps inside. The door opened. Lauren stood there. Up close, she looked younger than I expected. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail, wearing leggings and a sweatshirt. She gave me a polite but confused smile. Hi? For a moment, I couldn't speak, because behind her, in the living room, I could see Daniel sitting on the floor helping Emily build something with colorful plastic blocks. The scene looked so normal, it made my chest hurt. Lauren tilted her head slightly. Can I help you? I swallowed. Is Daniel here? Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes narrowed slightly with curiosity. Yeah, he's inside. Then she called over her shoulder. Dan, someone's here for you. The sound of his name made him look up. The moment his eyes landed on me, the color drained from his face. I have never seen someone go that pale that fast. He stood up slowly. Claire? Lauren turned back toward me, confused. You know each other? I held Daniel's gaze. Yes, I said quietly. Lauren waited for one of us to explain. Daniel looked like his brain had completely shut down, so I did it for him. I'm Claire Carter, I said. Then I let the next words fall into the silence. I'm Daniel's wife. Lauren blinked. Once, twice, like her mind was trying to process something that didn't make sense. His what? Daniel stepped forward quickly. Claire, but I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Lauren. I've been married to him for 13 years. The room went completely still. Emily looked up from the floor, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. Lauren slowly turned her head toward Daniel. Her expression had changed. The confusion was gone, replaced by something colder. Daniel, she said carefully, what is she talking about? He opened his mouth, closed it again. For once in his life, my husband had absolutely nothing to say. Lauren's face went white. You told me your divorce was finalized 10 years ago. My stomach twisted. Divorce. So that was the story he had given her. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. Lauren, I can explain. Explain what? She snapped. Her voice had risen now. You told me your ex moved to Oregon. Emily stood up slowly, looking between all 3 of us. Mom? Lauren didn't answer her. Her eyes were locked on Daniel like she was seeing him for the first time. You've been married this entire time? Daniel looked completely cornered. Yes, I said quietly before he could respond. Lauren's head snapped back toward me. You didn't know? I asked. She shook her head slowly. No. That single word felt like a punch to the chest, because suddenly it wasn't just me standing there betrayed. It was both of us. 2 women who had been living completely separate lives built on the same lie. Lauren let out a hollow laugh that sounded like it hurt. So all those nights you said you were traveling for work? She gestured vaguely toward me. You were with her. Daniel looked between us like someone watching 2 fires spread toward him. Lauren, please. Don't, she said sharply. Her voice dropped to something quieter but far more dangerous. You brought her to my house. You let her stand here and find out like this. Daniel finally seemed to realize how catastrophic the situation was. Claire, he said weakly, I was going to tell you. After how many years? I asked. He didn't answer. Emily tugged on Lauren's sleeve. Mom, what's happening? Lauren crouched down quickly, pulling her daughter close. Go to your room for a minute, sweetheart. The girl hesitated, glancing at Daniel. Then she quietly walked down the hallway. The moment she disappeared, Lauren stood up again. Her eyes moved between me and Daniel. You need to leave, she said to him. He looked stunned. Lauren, now. Her voice didn't rise, but there was no arguing with it. Daniel stood there frozen. For the first time since I had known him, he looked completely powerless. I stepped back toward the door. I'm leaving, I said. Lori nodded slightly. Then she looked back at Daniel. You should go with her. He followed me outside without another word. We walked down the driveway in silence. When we reached my car, he finally spoke. Claire, please let me explain. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I had loved for 13 years, the man who had somehow lived two completely different lives at the same time. And I realized something strange. The heartbreak was still there, but underneath it was something else. Clarity. You already explained, I said quietly. Then I got in my car and drove away. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks later. And as far as I know, that was the day Daniel Carter, also known as Daniel Harper, lost both of his families at the same time.